It's a cloudy day in Hollywood. And we are going on a hike in Sherman Oaks. And today, I just wanted to talk about not belonging. What do I mean by that? I am referring to the experience of being a third culture kid. A third culture kid is just someone who grows up in different countries or spends an extensive time, usually during their development years, in an environment that's different to their home environment. And this can happen multiple times in different countries. So for example, myself, growing up in 3 different countries, or my wife growing up in 2 different countries, Brazil and the States, we have integrated different cultures, so we're familiar with the environment we're in, but we also are outsiders in the sense that we see and experience things differently. I was at a party the other day, and I was talking to this guy who was from Mexico, I believe, and he was talking about how whenever he visits Latin countries like Spain or Italy, he feels like he can relate more than here in the States. But also while he's in those countries, he also feels like he can't relate, because when he says he's from America, people are like, well, you don't talk like an American, you don't look like one, you're not an American. And it frustrated him a lot. And as I was talking to him, you know, I was like, oh, hey, you're a third culture kid. This is a pretty common phenomenon. But as I kind of explained my background, he was like, you know what, man, for the first time in a long time, for the first time in years, I feel like I'm talking to someone who understands me. And I was like, yeah, it's not easy, man, being a third culture kid, but at the same time, it's very advantageous if you know what to do, and if you know how to, again, be a third culture kid and adapt, because that's what TCKs are great at doing. So the reason I wanted to talk about this subject is because I come across people who grew up in different cultures, especially living in LA, and a lot of times people don't know where they fit in or who they are, and a lot of times they feel like there's something wrong with them, like people just don't understand me, even though I feel Hispanic or I feel American. These cultures that I identify with, or these groups that I identify with, they don't relate to me. I can't relate to them. And oftentimes they feel stuck. And the reality is in some ways, no, we don't fit in. Because this experience of being a third culture kid has only like kind of blown up in the last, I want to say, 10 years. So in one aspect, yeah, we're not like everybody, in the sense that they have been brought up in one place. But at the same time, you can be anybody, because you understand and you've experienced as a third culture kid the method of adapting, of listening, of embracing ideas that are not familiar and are alien. What is this guy doing? Yo, LA drivers are crazy. Side note, I find this pretty common in tropical weather places. Chicago, amazing driving. Amazing. You know why? Because they drive through blizzards every winter. Black ice. Whatever you got on the road, Chicago drivers have driven through it. Tropic countries, people don't care. LA, Florida, Texas, the South, just the South in general. Worst driving ever. Colder climates, the driving is on point. Anyway. It is windy and dusty. But gorgeous. And this is why we love California. You don't get to do this many places year round. Not year round. Stop here to get a break from the wind. But one of the reasons you don't feel like you belong anywhere is because you don't come from one place anymore. If you have grown up in a different country and you're living in another one, or even if the country is big enough where cultures, subcultures are diverse enough, you grew up in a small town, moved to a city, what you are experiencing is the differences in culture, but you're experiencing them internally. For example, someone who's born in America went to a Hispanic home, but then goes to Mexico, right? They're going to feel completely different because they're now American Mexican. So on the outside, they might look Hispanic, but on the inside, they're a combination of American values and culture and Hispanic culture. So when you go to another country, even another Latin country, for example, or Hispanic country, you will still feel different. If you go to your grandparents' home back in Mexico, you will still feel different because you aren't purely Mexican, you're also American. For myself, this was a huge frustration growing up because I felt like I understood American culture, but in America, I wasn't seen as American. As a kid in India, I thought, well, I'm Indian, I understand what's going on, I understand the language, but because my English accent was American, I still didn't fit in because there was a part of me that was American that went, hold on, some of this stuff doesn't make sense. And then in the UK, it was the same thing. So, point number one being, you don't really belong anywhere because you've come from different places. So there isn't one specific place now that defines you as it did before. The second reason you might feel like you don't belong, and why that's okay, is because you see the flaws in the culture that you once took for granted. You see things that don't work, things that don't make sense that people do, that they take as normal. But for many third culture kids, we struggle with this because we think, well, this isn't working. Why is this function or thing that we do in this society acceptable? It doesn't make sense. But to the people around you, it's like, well, duh, this is what we do. This is common, you know. One of the things my friend I met talked about, he said, in Latin cultures, it's okay to express how you feel to someone of the opposite sex or someone that you're attracted to. Men are very passionate. They talk about how beautiful the woman is. They pursue actively, and in Latin cultures this is pretty common, whereas in the West you don't really express how you feel. You kind of hide it, and you play cool, right? You don't give on that you're interested directly and so forthright chasing the woman. At least a lot of people don't, because it seems thirsty, it seems like you need them. And this is very much frowned upon in a society that's individualistic, and I can take care of myself and I don't need anyone. So to many of us, those differences are frustrating, and we feel like we don't belong because certain things that we're comfortable with and the way that we operate and the way that we're used to operating in one society doesn't necessarily fit in another, and you can be criticized and laughed at for doing so. So the second reason is that you see the issues in that society and in that context that don't make sense to you, but it makes complete sense to the society there. Should you feel frustrated about this? I'm not here to tell you what you should do, but what you can, or another perspective maybe, instead of getting frustrated, is to realize that you know something that might work better. You know something that might be more efficient or more understanding, or something that makes you feel like it's a better way, a better approach. And instead of being frustrated about it, you can execute it, you can change it, you can make it different. What do I mean by this?
So just to give you an example, when my family moved to the States for the first time from India, it was complete culture shock for our whole family. However, my family was quickly able to get plugged in because my mom was raised as a Christian in India. And so my family had that understanding of American Christian culture. And moving to South Carolina from remote Northeast India, while there's a huge disparity in culture, in language, in lifestyle, that was the one point of connection that enabled my family to get plugged into the community, to build a support base around them, and it benefited them quickly than, say, someone from a totally different culture that wouldn't understand the dynamics of Southern Baptists or the Bible Belt. So maybe for you, if you're a third culture kid and you're growing up in a country and you feel like the outsider, but you can still somehow relate in different ways, try and figure out what it is that helps you relate or understand, and instead of maybe resenting a people group or finding differences, when you find a common point between someone else, it's like anything, it's like having a conversation with a stranger. When you find something that you connect with, regardless of the other person's background or ethnicity, that is where you can build that and build a connection with that person. For myself, I've been able to build many friendships, many relationships, many support systems this way. I've been able to help others, I've been able to connect in places you'd never think to find that sort of connection. Just like a family in India moving to the southern part of America and finding a community very quickly doesn't seem very probable.
So I found some bushes, hide from the wind. Let's see. There's a good spot. Third reason I wanted to talk about was the fact that, yeah, you don't belong. You don't belong in any country. You belong to both of them and more. Because, see, your identity, for most people who grew up in one place or one country, that sense of identity, culture, language is fixed. For most immigrants, immigrant children, third culture kids, we don't just belong to one place. We now belong to 2, 3, 4 different places. And who you are is a unique mixture and combination of all of those. So just remember, when you're criticizing a country, you're also criticizing part of who you are. But also, when you're criticizing it, you're also seeing it from a new perspective. You're the person who's able to see how something could be improved. If you've grown up in Europe, you know how amazing universal healthcare is, because you've experienced it. You know what it's like not to have to worry about that. If you've never experienced universal healthcare, you're going to be afraid of it. Why? Because it's different. And all those fears of the unknown are going to pop up until you actually experience it for yourself. So as someone who is from many cultures, just remember, you don't belong in one place. You belong in many places. As the world gets smaller and smaller, future generations are no longer going to call one country their home. There's going to be many countries. And this is pretty common in Europe, where many people speak a few languages. But in the next couple decades, we'll be seeing a much bigger phenomena with this.